Got it. Okay. Back through. Okay. Give a little second.
So we're just talking about convergence. Taylor's given us the definition. This is a late start to the recording. And I think you can go back to where you were.
All right. Where was I? Okay, so when you're working in convergence research, it's going to have a slightly different pattern. And a key factor, this was a group, this was published in 2023. A group had the Converge program funding through the NSF. So they worked strictly through all the processes and through a cohort through the NSF to follow their convergence plans. And they published their results with a focus on their particular experience with convergence research. And a key thing that they brought up was that a thing that was particular in convergence research is that you'll have these loops back and forth between your focused efforts and work that you thought you would be doing, and then transcendent moments. So you'll have these phases, and at each time you may see that your problem or solution ideas are expanding or broadening. And during these, you'll be integrating broader and richer collections from perspectives because you have so many different backgrounds working on this, and this is how it should be. At times, it can feel more chaotic and less productive than if you're in a focused workspace the entire time, but it also tends to breed more innovation and will also spur parallel focus inquiries. And this is expected in spaces like this that need a convergent approach. So anything with interacting and coupled social ecological components. And a key thing that's important to making this work is that there needs to be a formal mechanism for coming back together to share the learning and leveraging it across the whole community of stakeholders. So I think this team does a really good job of bringing back in, oh, this is something we ran into. This is something that was unexpected or a new thing that's found. And it can feel like we had different ways, but that is a key component that they said that was unexpected to them in this process. And it ultimately ended up making their projects better. All right, so the NSF has their own definition of convergence, and its goal is to solve these vexing research problems, especially with a societal need focus, which this team knows all about. But there are two primary characteristics to what they want to see in this convergence, and it needs to be driven by a specific and compelling problem, and it should be either from deep scientific side or for pressing societal needs. I think this group is covering that quite well, and it needs to show deep integration across the disciplines. So this is the part that is a little more wishy-washy whenever you're trying to determine how do we showcase that we're doing this, and are we doing this? So we want to show this deep integration, and it's bringing together intellectually diverse groups. And that's why we have political science backgrounds, we have just civil engineering, we have modeling, we've got systems, we have a lot happening. And that's the goals here. So these are the characteristics of a project that the NSF would consider successful for convergence. So it needs to show a need for a convergent approach. So it needs to be able to say, well, why do we need to bring together these different groups? Why can't it just be solved by engineering alone? Or why can't it just be solved, by a social science effect? It also needs to show that there will be an integration of the next generation of researchers. So to be successful, they want to see that it's not just going to stop here and it's going to make it better for the next group. So the NSF likes to see the integration of undergrad students and then grad students, postdoc fellows, but they also want to see that they're not just doing grunt work on the project. They want to see them learning how to apply these types of convergence methodologies in the future, so that when they are PI of their own work, they can have used this as a model. The integration of knowledge, tools, and modes of thinking. So not only should you be contributing to your discipline, but integrating and leveraging what others in the group can offer you. And co-developing is a key thing that the NSF likes to see. And this group, looking back through even call notes, just started right out the gate of talking about what should we do? How should we approach this? How can we all work together in the best way? And they want to see that. They also want to see that your modes of thinking changing, because there may be completely different thoughts that you have whenever you talk to a social scientist versus a data scientist. And also a readiness to engage in convergence research. There's plenty of people who want to do it. They've found a key problem that they think needs convergent approaches. They have people ready to go. They know how to integrate it, but they're just not ready yet. So the NSF would like to see that you are ready to do so. And good examples of this, if you're trying to demonstrate to them, especially if you're trying to get a proposal, is that you have previously worked on interdisciplinary projects. Any of the team members have previously had publications together, or that there are multiple members on the team with specialized knowledge of ways to work towards this problem from different disciplines. And then obviously showing them that you have co-developed this plan together, and it wasn't one person saying, I've got a great idea, but now we need to add some modelers. So there's the ways that our team has kind of worked towards this. So the need for a convergent approach, I'm not going to read that to you. You all know it was the ongoing plan here is that, we need to be able to mesh together the way energy transitions are currently handled and thought about, and also understand all the human aspects of well-being and decisions for change that are kind of overlooked often. So involvement of next generation of convergent researchers. I think we're doing great here. We've got Karthik working on his data set and well-being. We had Anne over the summer, who was a summer intern through She's in Power, who looked at the res stock data. We just got Zara and Raidul. So Zara works in systems and Raidul works on modeling. And in the past, we've had the integration from Paige, who is also in social sciences and worked on our Sapphires team. So, and any others, if there's people I've forgotten or you think should be mentioned there, or we want to consider adding on, I think just send me an email, let me know in this meeting. Be helpful to know. The readiness to engage in research, we also really off to a great start with that, because each person on this team has that specific knowledge of these problems from their field and has background in these types of things. And the team really worked right out the gate on developing kind of how we were going to do this, how often we're going to meet, how are we going to kind of disseminate the knowledge between the groups. And of course, it's constantly being revisited and figuring out what needs to be shared whenever there's a question of, so what data are we exactly getting out of these public records? And the team's been really good about that. And I think also about documenting those types of things. Tammy and Arsema have PhDs from interdisciplinary programs, which is another thing that the NSF likes to see. It just is an easy tick box for a program manager, I think. And Tammy and Ellison are involved, and Ryan are involved in CSU's Patch Group, the Partnership for Air Quality, Climate, and Health here at CSU. It's an interdisciplinary group of researchers that are just trying to kind of look at these types of things from different views, and even showing involvement with that within your campuses and with other groups is helpful. So if any of you who I don't know or work as closely with are involved in similar initiatives, so please let me know. Awesome. And then joint publications amongst team members, whether before this project started or as something that has come along throughout the project, are great examples and ways to show that we're consistently working together. And then the big one that the NSF likes to work on is that integration of knowledge, tools, modes of thinking. So we've had ongoing group meetings, and the steering of the project changes based on what we're finding and what each person is bringing to the table. The sharing of resources, this team's great about even sending an email out like, hey, I found this publication that I think would be useful, or brainstorming places that we can have a session proposal in other sectors that we might not know about in our own disciplines. So working well for that. And it would be helpful to be able to see that we have presented in some of those. Yep, Tammy.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the nice words, Taylor. I think you're pointing out some of the things that you see we do well. I also want to encourage people who are listening that if you don't feel like we're doing these things well, please be sure to say that, because we want to be able to improve and not just feel like we're great. So we're going to try to tell NSF that we're great. But if you see where we're falling short, please bring it forward.
Yeah, definitely. Or if you have suggestions of ways that it'd be easier to see or get this information, anything like that, helpful. Let's see, and then yeah, the collaborative development of projects and products. There was a quote from Narsema back in 2022, and I found it to be just a good way to demonstrate the type of thinking that NSF is looking forward to here for the integration of modes of thinking and the whole project. And he said that he thinks it's really important for us all to have a common understanding of what we're trying to do with the model building, because we may draw upon each other's work in our model building, such as he'd like to understand mental models and other tools others will be using. And when we've done similar brainstorming sessions, or in the question a couple weeks ago about what do we expect to get as input from other people or output, there were a lot of similar types of things, like Ellison mentioning that she'd like to know a little, be able to see kind of the modeling frameworks from Karthik's work and these types of things, that it showcases how much we need the other aspects of the work rather than just finding it interesting and using it as an additive aspect. Let's see here. Oh, and I think that's actually where the slides end today. I have been working on a timeline and parsing it down. So I think that a timeline will be a nice way of showing what we're doing. And then a diagram type model of what each person is outputting in the project and who it's going to, and vice versa input. So it got a little chaotic, and I didn't want to show a work in progress on that and just confuse everybody, but it will, that's in the works right now. But would love to hear other things that you think should be mentioned, things you think should be just kind of just considered in this type of work, or just anything that this brought up for you. There we go.
Could you say a little bit about what's on the timeline, even if you're not ready to share it?
Oh, sure. So on the timeline, it has kind of, I tried to focus on things that were in those 4 requests of the NSF to show what is a good project for this. So the timeline showcases the kind of assembly of the team and their expertise in the focus, as well as those early meetings of when determining the structure of the program or of the project, also including anytime the team got together, they like to see that you've met in person or worked towards that, including any of the trainings and workshops on convergence type of work. And I want to add in any development times of shared data sources, or like we've created this, if we're at that point, but that's something I want to actually be able to talk with you and get the real times on, things like that. Same with if anyone has joint publications or seminars or anything, those would be things we would add in the future when we do those, when someone presents at a atypical conference for them.
And I think part of this, where this is coming from, is many of us were at the workshop from, was it GDI in March? Right, they did something with our team, and I can't remember who was able to attend. But they mentioned that NSF really wants to see this stuff documented. And so to me, I feel like we keep trying, we keep wondering whether we're doing it right. And sometimes I don't feel like talking about it because I'm not sure that we're doing it right. And I certainly don't feel like putting it in a progress report, but they emphasize that NSF really wants to see this kind of documentation. And so I figured, sure, we can do that. It probably won't hurt. But more to the point for me, I think of the annual report as a time to take stock of where you are, where you think you should be. So on this matter, I'm curious what people think about what you might see in such a report, and where you think we should be going to try to understand each other better or work together better. Like, what have we done well? What have we not done well? What should we fill in? And then we'll figure out what to tell NSF.
Can you go to the slide that you kind of the reporting in it? Oh, can you go back to the slide that had the 4 quadrants with
Absolutely.
how the team is thinking about convergence?
All right. Let's see why it's not sharing. Let's just do a new share. There we go. Open.
So just on our project on the convergent approach, establishing research and energy transition neglects many dimensions. In order to study effectively, we have to harness the expertise of social scientists, engineers, etc. I just want to point out that, like, to me, this feels like all of the research is sort of only relying on the experts that we think of as experts, as people in academics or academia that have a PhD, or they're a teacher, or they've been involved in research and studying. I feel like what is missing from this is harnessing the experience and expertise of non-academic professionals and practitioners in the field. I don't know if you get in trouble with NSF if something like that is added in, but I feel like it's a really important component to this work that I would like to see represented.
Thank you, Stacy. I think NSF wants that. Oh, there's 2 or 3 different levels. NSF says they want that. And I want that. And I think we recognize that is important. So let's put it in there. And nominally, one of the ways in which convergence begins to differ from the earlier integrations is in the inclusion of not just academic perspectives. So yes, let's do that. Keep waving the flag, Stacy. Thank you.
Oh, I'll stop sharing that. I won't make y'all watch that. Watch me take notes anyway. Anyone else? I'd love to hear, especially from some of you that I don't get to work with as closely, like Chris, Adam, Kartik, definitely Stacy, thank you. And just to get y'all's thoughts on anything that you think should be included, or things that I might not even know that are going on kind of in the background.
I think for me, I have a somewhat unusual perspective, I suppose, because I was on another convergence project through another position. that didn't get refunded by NSF. And I can talk about the things that we did, but I don't know if that means that they were not sufficient or that NSF didn't like them or if there were other reasons. So that's probably, that might be a second discussion. Like, here's what we tried, but I can't tell you that, we created this deliverable and it wasn't enough. Maybe NSF really liked that, but they didn't like other aspects of the project, if that makes any sense. But I'm happy that might be another discussion at some point, maybe.
No, I think you're right, Adam. It's kind of a black box or a red box or something. It's something that has fire in it because nothing comes out the other end. Nobody knows what happens. So I am saying things like NSF wants this. We actually really don't know what they want. We've heard other people say they want, we've heard what they say they want. And it is really a mystery.
Do we know what projects have advanced in NSF's eyes within the convergence funding structure they have?
I mean, I guess we could, it's public, right? So we could look it up, but no, I haven't done that. I thought of doing it, but it hasn't risen to the top of my list.
But it's not like they're putting together like a summary either of like, we have this program and these are the projects or teams that have advanced. It's not like they have that readily available.
They do, they have had a couple of, I don't know if it's webinars, but like they haven't ever come out and said explicitly, this is what advanced and didn't advance, but they have done things like hear from our convergence teams.
Mm-hmm.
So this may be forward looking and maybe this won't give you the right feedback, Taylor. But another thing I'm going to be doing in the next month or so is we were working with Gemma Jiang to do some exercises. And what I want to do is, I felt like those could have been, I felt like they were useful, but we could have done them better. And that requires probably engaging with the facilitator if they're willing. Because I felt like we didn't get enough time. There wasn't enough follow-up, but they were good things to work on. And so maybe thinking about the kinds of things that you find valuable. We have a subcontract to Gemma for doing that kind of thing, but I want to take a little more control over what we do. And so in addition to reflecting on what we're going to report, let's reflect on how we would like to update our practice. My bone is or one of my peeves by now is that I've now done a bunch of team trainings or integration trainings or whatever, and they all start, or Gemma didn't, but a lot of them start with the assumption that you have no idea what you're doing. You don't know how to work in a team and you don't think it's important. And it's like, no, okay, let's skip that part. Let's start with, here's the hard stuff. Here's how you diagnose it and here's how you get over it, right? Do you folks have maybe something actionable to think about is, given that, so Taylor and I will submit this report as an appendix, and then it will be referred to in our report. What would you like to bring forward about your experience in your report? What would you say to NSF? Like, by the way, convergence was one of the things we had to do. Rather than list of things that we did, which Taylor's going to put together, I think it might be beneficial to think about my practice is different in the following ways, right? This is how I think I have changed, or this is what I did under this project that I would not have done if those other people were not providing feedback. Because that's really the process, is it's supposed to change the way you do things.
I think for me, a lot of the convergence occurs a little bit later. So it's difficult. I'm not trying to be elusive in terms of how I'm thinking about what we've done. It's just that to me, a lot of that work comes to some extent after more interviews have been conducted, and so I see this is that hopefully unfolding soon. But as far as now, I guess personally, if I were to reflect on my portion of the project and what I'm doing now, the convergence probably comes from the smaller team that I've been working with. I would imagine that if I were to look at well-being on my own, that I would have been looking at it from more exclusively a sociological perspective. And a lot of what Ellison contributed in terms of the ways that well-being has been looked at certainly helped, is instrumental in informing the script that's currently being used to interview people. So I would offer that we've started on that process, just not as fully as we're going to.
Thanks, Chris. I feel like the process that we went through with Stacy in attempting to assemble the boards, where there wasn't a response, or it didn't feel engaging for a while, and we're still iterating on this, but just being willing to respond to, like, okay, what's going on here? Why are we not, what kind of feedback are we seeking? And why are we not getting it? And is it just, it's because we've envisioned a world where people respond to things the way we do? And I think, so I feel like that's an example of taking different ways of looking at a problem and changing the way you do things, recognizing you're still seeking an outcome.
I mean, I think I'm struggling to come up with any way in which what I do on this project is different. I don't really understand how convergence, the way it's defined by NSF, feels like what it feels like to be a researcher. Never felt anything different than that. And so I feel a little bit defensive, like, this isn't new, NSF. This is what being a researcher is like. And I don't know what your counterfactual is. Like, I always feel like there's more inputs than I can process, and the drive towards synthesis is like the main goal. So it doesn't really feel any different. That's why I'm really struggling. Like, what's different about this? I don't know. That me, their definitions of convergence is science and research, like not something special. So I struggle with them and their differentiation of this particular funding packet that they have put forward, because I disagree that it's different, but then I mean, I can back up from that a little bit and understand that they fund a lot of work that falls along traditional disciplinary boundaries and doesn't necessarily redefine new boundaries. So I kind of can understand that, but I just can't think of anything that feels different than like what I've ever felt. So I'm struggling, but I can work on it. I just don't. I'm trying to explain why I'm being a little quiet or not having anything to provide, because I don't know what to say.
I think you're not giving yourself enough credit there, Allison. Like, to me, part of that is like you already did interdisciplinary work, and like the interdisciplinary convergence thing is like feels very jargony still to me. But like I know like most of my colleagues, like they publish in like disciplinary journals, and when they get NSF grants, it's to like do AJPS articles, and like that's not really what a lot of people on this team have ever done. And so like I think like you're a little unique, and maybe as a team we're a little bit unique that way, and so like we're gonna wrestle with that a little bit more.
I can kind of feel what you say, Allison, because I think you're saying, but this is how it should be done. Why would you say that this is wonderful? And I hear you. I feel like for me, it's like, oh, now I have an excuse to do what I wanted to do anyway, right? It's pushing me to do something that I wasn't going to do. It just takes some barriers away, because then I'm like, oh, you know, that thing that you said was out of scope? No, convergence, we have to do it.
Yeah, I was just talking with some of the students that are new to my group about how I feel like, you know, there's like movements like slow fashion and slow eating or slow food, like slow fill in the blank. And maybe convergence is slow thinking or something like that. Slower than like the conveyor belt of like ingest a data set, spit out a paper to a closed loop of people that will either get off on reviewing it really harshly or the fact that we're reviewing it well. So
Yeah. And yeah, to me, it's just the thing that's the biggest weirdo about this whole thing is giving you 2 years to perform, because then it's like, who can think that fast? I don't know. I can't think that like if you're gonna acknowledge the problems, then you need like 10 years, right? I get accountability and forward motion and all that stuff, but yeah. So I think the challenge is to I also when I write stuff like, oh, look how good we are because we did this stuff, then I feel it makes me feel weird. It's like I'm selling something that should already be there. But at the same time, you do have to help. I'm not confident that we can convince people, but you have to be able to help them see into your world, I guess.
And I think that's how my first report got so granular, is that I've worked a lot in cancer research and then also in like very specific fields like reptile parasitology, just very specific. And all the efforts that I've worked on those are only being published in parasitology journal. No one is reading it except a parasitologist, because no one particularly cares if you're noticing a slight difference in measurement of, the vulva of a worm. So it's just, I think I'm continually impressed by this group, because you're constantly thinking of like the outer reaches of it, how you can better interconnect, and even just having these meetings where you all bring to the table a little more of like, well, let's think about this now, or I have an idea. it might feel normal to all of you, but it is definitely not in other places I've worked. They're like, skip that, that's too complicated. Let's get back to this worm.
Yeah, I want to add to piece like one of the article that I was discussing with Tammy, trying to understand how well-being is measured in terms of conventional knowledge. And there's a recent paper in PNAS, like Daniel Kahneman, sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. So the conventional way of measuring well-being is just look from the economics, like income perspective. And the conclusion, this is a recent paper, like in 2023, and one of the reasons that he's an American Israeli psychologist, so he wants to mention the fact that the social science needs to be better integrated so as to understand the traditional economics theory. He argues that traditional economics theory may not be fulfilling to explain consumer behavior. And when I explained that to Tammy, she mentioned that this is general knowledge. Why people took so much long time to acknowledge that fact? So I think that's something that NSM is trying to acknowledge and trying to push people who may have overlooked that fact and bring forth that convergence idea moving forward.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's a failure of academia to acknowledge reality, but in different ways. So we're trying, it does sometimes feel like we're trying to fix a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place. But here we are. It's time to close down, folks. Thank you for your thoughts, and please continue to think about what would be beneficial for you. Whatever we tell NSF, whatever the outcome of our funding or refunding, what I think the long view is, how does it change you? How does it change your practice? And how can we contribute to things that are more holistic and better for people to useful, right? Useful as opposed to not useful and not realistic. Thank you for bringing your baby. She's getting big.
She's a baby giant. So he woke
Yeah.
up from nap time. So
Hello. Thank you, everyone. Always appreciate the conversations. Okay, so no meeting Friday next week, and then those of us who can will come see Kartik and we'll fix the invitations. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.